Kia ora, everyone. I was intrigued to see an example from New Zealand, actually. It was very interesting. But I'm going to talk about what we do in Africa. And it is unfortunately very true that there can be a conflict between preservation, conservation, and poor people. And based on our experiences and what we've learned, I'd like to give a few suggestions as to how we can reduce the potential for conflict. And the first point is that we focus on sustainable management rather than preservation or conservation. Words matter, and words like preservation and conservation, protection, suggest to us at least locking up. And that's not what we in the UN believe we should be doing. So when we advise governments, we emphasize sustainable management. And if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, that's what the focus is. And the umbrella objective of Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals is to eradicate poverty in whatever form or wherever it occurs, the principle of leaving no one behind. So how do we minimize the conflict between wanting to manage the environment, natural resources sustainably, and the overarching objective of reducing poverty? Well, one of a very important tool that we use to convince governments to invest in sustainability, but to do so in a way that helps eliminate poverty, is we carry out economic analysis that demonstrates just how dependent people are on the environment and natural resources. For example, in Malawi, we found that rural households, 18% on average of their household income comes from forests. So if we and the government decided to, build a fence around the forest, you immediately deprive people, households, of 18% of their income. And that would be devastating to people who live on, who are on very poor already. So we get disaggregated evidence of how dependent people are on the environment and natural resources. And we need to get that evidence in a disaggregated manner, particularly between men and women. And we found it's very important that women be interviewed, surveyed separately from men. Because if we do it together, for cultural reasons, the views of the men dominate. And sometimes the views of the men are inconsistent with what's in the best interest of the woman and the children. For example, in certain districts in Tanzania, we found out that overgrazing, by there being too many cattle for this area of land, was a problem. There were many cattle, and also food insecurity, especially in female-headed households, was a serious problem. And one of the reasons why food insecurity was so bad is that the women wanted to grow crops to feed children, maize, for example, beans, but the men wanted cattle, including for prestige. And it was through interviewing and having the cattle meant there was less land for crops. And it was through interviewing separately the men and the women that these details started to come out. So once you've got a very accurate figure, a very comprehensive picture of the value of the environment, natural resources to people, in quantitative and qualitative terms, then you need to look at who has control, you know, who makes the decisions about how natural resources are used. And then you need to work with the stakeholders, the communities, the decision makers in governments, the donors who give money for projects, and design the policies designed to reduce deforestation, and do it in a manner that gives incentives for poor people, because they know they will not be locked out of the forest. And if their access is reduced, there's an alternative. Like in Rwanda, some parts of Rwanda, the government is supplying cooking gas so that people have an incentive not to go and cut trees for charcoal to cook food. So you need to provide an alternative, and you need to provide an alternative that's designed, I emphasize this, in a gender disaggregated manner. Women are more concerned about spend a lot of time collecting water, cooking. So what is an alternative that will address the needs of the woman? That is an example. And where natural resources, say a national park is set up, or there needs to be some reduction in deforestation, the income from the national forest, the income from the national park, the income from, like, say, logging some of the timber for commercial sale, there has to be equitable benefit sharing. And that's another reason why it's important to do a comprehensive economic analysis, so you understand how people rely, and do an analysis on the options. And I don't mean a kind of a financial analysis. I mean a comprehensive economic analysis that looks at non-market, non-monetary values, not just, you know, a traditional neoliberal type economic analysis. We don't want that. We carry out comprehensive, disaggregated analysis that looks at the poverty and its causes in detail. So if people are treated with respect and their needs are met, then efforts to have sustainable land use, sustainable forestry, sustainable water use, they're far more likely to succeed and be sustainable. So this is why we recommend that a key emphasis on equitable benefit sharing in order to incentivize poor people to help sustain and manage our environment, which in the long term will be in their interests. And what we do with these policy recommendations, because the UN can only recommend, unless we're the Security Council, we can't actually force governments to do anything. But this economic analysis is very powerful for convincing the very important decision makers in countries, and these are the ministries of planning, of finance, of agriculture. So you need to target the people who make the decisions that impact the most on the environment. It's not environmentalists who damage, or decisions by environmentalists that damage the environment. It's decisions by ministries of planning, finance, agriculture, for example, that impact the most. So you need to convince the decision makers in those ministries that it is in the national interest and the interests of poor people to invest in sustainability in a way that will benefit poor people. And that can be quite a complicated and long-term process. But ultimately, if we are to be successful in sustainable development that contributes significantly towards poverty reduction, we have to convince these decision makers who are outside the normal, if you like, environmental list of stakeholders. Thank you.